trauma symptoms, things like that. One of the questions that they ask is the last occurrence of any sexual activity. The question is, has the patient had any penile, vaginal penetration contact within the past 5 days? Jane Doe II answered yes. And she listed the date at 5/11/2018. And did ejaculation occur inside the vagina? Yes. Was a condom used? No.
Was that caught?
Was a condom used?
Thank you.
No. And so this expert is testifying as to her findings of the redness that she testified to. There's erythema, which is essentially redness in the vaginal area. We have a woman here who's testified that she had consensual sex. Looks like 2.5 days, 3 days previous to the actual assault and the examination. And I think it's fair game for cross-examination because it's just likely that that could be the result of consensual sexual contact that she had. And I think this expert will concede that.
In Your Honor, the people are objecting to this testimony because it falls squarely within Evidence Code Section 1103 and 782 that each prohibit any testimony regarding prior instances, reputation, or other evidence of sexual conduct on the part of a rape victim. This is exactly the type of evidence that oftentimes defense counsel will attempt to use as a way to try to call into question whether or not she consented to sexual activity in this particular instance, and therefore implicates this absolute bar to doing so. Moreover, defense counsel has failed to comply with the requirements procedurally under 782 that would then allow the court to make a determination of whether or not they'd be able to get into that area. The reason why we brought this to the court's attention is because Mr. Watkins, in his opening statement, made a statement that there had been another person's DNA found inside Jane Doe number 2, and now that we are at the point where we're talking about the DNA swab collection that took place during the start examination, I was concerned that Mr. Carlos on cross-examination may try to go into that area.
All right, well, here's what we're going to do. I mean, there's been no written motion as required by Evidence Code Section 782A.
Well, you're
correct?
That's correct.
Can I say, this is not an attack on the credibility, reputation of this particular victim. This is an expert who's testifying about the items that she considered in making whatever evaluation, whatever conclusion she's reached. All of this is part and parcel of her ultimate conclusion if she's going to render some type of an opinion. And
all right. Well, so it's your position that you're not offering it to attack the credibility of the witness?
Not of the victim. I'm offering it to challenge the validity of the opinion of the expert.
Well, I mean, it could be argued that you're trying to backdoor this evidence in and not adhere to the requirements under 782, though.
Well, except if it's just redness. If she's testifying as to redness, and this individual said that she had consensual sex 2 days before the actual examination, I mean, I think that's. I'm not impugning the integrity of anybody. It's consensual. It's her right to have it, but it has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with her reputation. Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But there's also a bar on specific instances of prior sexual conduct under 1102, under 1103, and people are asking to entirely preclude that. What it does is it creates this implied aura of her having engaged in promiscuity and being engaged in potentially consensual sexual conduct, and therefore it parlays over into the notion that she may have consented to this act. That's why the people are asking that the court require them to strictly comply with the procedural requirements, and since they haven't, they should not be able to get into it with this witness. Moreover, it doesn't contradict or attack the credibility of this witness's findings. She's just reporting what she's seen. So the idea that they're going to then be able to ask whether or not this could have resulted from consensual sex 3 days prior really doesn't impact the jury's consideration of the evidence that's being presented through Nurse Williams.
All right. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We have a jury that's been waiting for 5 minutes to come in. This actually should have been handled as a pretrial motion. So I am going to not allow the defense to inquire in this area at this point. you can file a written motion and we will handle it, not in the next 5 minutes and leave the jury out there. We'll leave the nurse subject to recall. She's not leaving town or anything, is she?
No.
All right, so I'm going to reserve my ruling on this issue and allow you to file your written motion on this, all right? And then we will have a hearing and determine if you can ask that question, but we're not going to do it now because the jurors are out there waiting. So you can cross-examine her, not on that area though.
But I can cross-examine the expert saying that any consensual sex within days of it could also result in the findings that she had.
Well, I've heard the cross-examination before. I'm sure you're going to ask if these types of abrasions could be consistent with consensual sex. I imagine,
Right.
Who's doing the cross? Are you? Okay. So I imagine you're probably going to ask that, correct?
Correct.
And that's fair game. Do you have any objection to that, Mr. Owens?
No, and I expect that the response is going to be that she can't make any conclusion or opinion based on the issue of consent.
Right, so you can cross-examine on that area, but with respect to Jane Doe number 2's answer about that question, that's going to be subject to a separate hearing. So you can cross-examine on what we just discussed, but they will, I'm going to order that you not ask her about her actual previous sexual encounters. And that's without prejudice. I mean, we're going to hear that later, and then this nurse will be subject to recall.
That's fine.
All right, bring him in. We are now meeting in the presence of the jury. Sorry for the delay. We had a brief legal issue to discuss outside your presence. The witness is still on the stand. You are still under oath. All right, so you can continue your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Now, we were discussing the findings that you made as it related to Jane Doe 2's vaginal area and her anal area. Based upon your experience, your training, your education, and the specifics of what you saw and observed in those two specific areas, were those indications of redness or erythema, were those consistent with the history provided by Jane Doe number 2?
They are consistent. There is no definitive cause for the redness. It could be a medical issue. However, given the history of penetration of the vagina and the anus, and there is specific redness in parts of that area, then it is possible.
Now, in terms of, we'll talk about the limitations of what you're able to testify to as a sexual assault nurse examiner. Are you ever able to render any opinions or conclusions about whether or not there was consensual sexual activity in the act?
We cannot say whether anything was consensual or not, no.
Now, continuing on in the collection of evidence that you engaged in, did you in fact attempt to collect any potential DNA samples from Jane Doe 2's body and then impound them in a rape kit or a SART kit?
I did.
Can you just explain to the jury how you do that and what you did in this particular instance?
On this particular instance, I took some swabs from her neck because there was a history of strangulation. Those are like Q-tips that are moistened with sterile water, and you swab the area where you think that the hands might have been on the neck, so you swab the neck area well. I also took, per protocol, swabs of her pubic, mons pubic, which is the area of her genitals. Also some external genital swabs. These are the same kind of cotton swabs with some saline water on. I also took some swabs of her vaginal area. She did not let me put a speculum in, which is a plastic instrument that we sometimes use in order to open up the vaginal walls. However, I was able to get 4 swabs from that area, and I also took 2 swabs from the external anal area. Each of these swabs are packaged independently. They are dried in a specific dryer. Then they are packaged, as I say, independently in a container, which are then sealed with her name, her case number, and then packaged appropriately for impounding.
And in terms of the individual items, the actual swabs that are collected, how is it that they're identified within the rape kit that's being impounded?
Each swab is identified of where the location of that swab took place. For instance, if it's the left neck, then the label on that evidence says left neck along with her identifying features. And then for each specific area where I take swabs, the location is clearly identified as that area.
And that would then correspond to the swab that was taken from each individual location. It is packaged separately, correct?
Correct.
And is that done in a forensically sound manner to ensure that there is no cross-contamination between the various swabs that are collected from the different parts of the body?
That is a controlled area, yes.
And when you say that you package it in a sterile container and you label it, did you in fact label the DNA swabs that were collected from Jane Doe number 2 under Sheriff's case number 18124974?
Just to clarify, they're not put into a sterile container, but it is a clean container. And then, yes, I label it accordingly.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes.
Do you recall if Detective John Johnson was present during the course of you administering the sexual assault examination for Jane Doe 2?
I believe the police was present during the interview part. I asked the patient if it is okay for the police to be part of that interview. The reason I do that is because sometimes I ask questions that are similar to the police questions. My questions are looking for areas of physical injury and evidence collection. So if the police are present, then hopefully the patient doesn't have to recount the story in such detail a second time. But the police are not present when I do the physical exam.
In addition to the DNA swabbing that you conducted from the areas that you've described, did you also impound within the same rape kit or SART kit the toxicological samples that you obtained, the blood samples and the urine samples?
I did.
And are those likewise identified, labeled, and then placed into the same container?
They are.
Did you collect any clothing at that point in time from Jane Doe number 2?
I did not.
Is that something that's oftentimes handled by the investigators from law enforcement?
No, often we will collect clothing, especially their underwear, but this is at the consent of the patient, and the patient had declined.
Do you recall whether or not there were some pants associated with Jane Doe number 2 that were in fact sealed into the, or they were the SART sealed victim pants identified as an evidence item number?
Can I refer to my report?
Yes, please do. And if it would refresh your recollection, I can approach and show you another document.
Yes, please.
May I, Your Honor?
Sure.
Have you had an opportunity to review that?
Yes, I have.
And does that refresh your recollection as to whether or not specifically Jane Doe number 2's pants were in fact recovered during that SART examination?
It was. She did decline the rest of any clothing, but she did consent to the pants being impounded.
And likewise, was the mat that was used at the time that the victim was undressing, was that likewise seized and impounded during the course of that sexual assault examination?
The mat.
Yes, what's described as the undress mat
Oh,
from the
yes.
SART?
Yes, it's called buckle paper, and we have the patient stand on that. And there's 2 layers of paper. The top layer is what they stand on, so that if there's any debris falls or evidence falls from the underwear or from the undressing process, it lands on the paper, and that we impound. The bottom paper we discard.
And in terms of your participation, is it fair to say that once you have packaged, labeled, identified all of these items and impounded them for pickup by the sheriff's department, then your participation in any further testing is now complete?
Yes, that is following the chain of custody.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, cross?
So how are you?
I'm good, how are you doing?
Okay, so what you've described is a I guess, fairly procedural investigation that you perform as an expert, correct?
Correct.
You've done this a number of times.
Yes,
You've testified as an expert in rape cases.
I have.
Yes.
Yes,
And you've testified in rape cases involving strangulation also.
I have.
So, the SART exam, the actual, I guess it's a report that you fill out, right?
Correct.
And the report has boxes and checks that you have to follow.
Correct.
Procedure?
Correct.
Right. And the reason that you have this is because it's a type of exam that you want to have some uniformity to, so that there's consistency in the evaluations. Right?
Correct.
Now, a major, just like any medical procedure or any medical evaluation, a major contributor, the major contributor, is patient history, correct?
Yes.
And for the jury's, just for the jury's understanding, what do you consider patient history to be?
Patient history includes all the questions that I ask her about patient history, her medical history, any medications that she may be on, whether she has urinated after the assault, the assault and before I see her. It's a comprehensive history, and then also there's a narrative history of the assault.
Okay, so in layman's terms, you ask them questions about their medical history, correct?
Correct.
You ask them questions about their present condition, correct?
Correct.
And then you ask them questions about the actual event which brought them there.
Correct.
And that is your patient history, right?
Yes.
I mean, and so, like in a doctor's office, you go into the doctor's office and say, it hurts when I do this. And that's part of patient history, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you rely on the accuracy of the person giving the history that started your patient history, right?
I rely on medical experience for assessing any injuries that they may have, and then I document what the patient has told me.
I understand that. So you as an expert can document the medical findings, the physical findings, correct?
From what I see,
Right.
yes.
But you have no way of assessing the credibility of the narrative that's given to you from the actual patient.
No, I write what they tell me, they say.
So in other words, the individual can have whatever version that they want to tell you. That's what you include in your report.
I write down what the person has told me, yes.
So you can't, as an expert, attest to the reliability of the patient history.
I was not there when the possible assault happened, so no, I couldn't.
I guess that's answering yes to my question, right? Yes.
Yes, I can't validate her history.
Okay. So in this particular case, correct me if I'm wrong, the findings that you have testified about are just basically redness in the vaginal area and hymen,
Correct.
erythema, no,
Erythema.
erythema, and also redness in the anal area.
Yes, correct.
In the exterior or interior of the?
External.
Okay, so let's start with the vaginal area. Well, unlike a doctor who has a patient and has medical records of their patient, you don't have that, do you?
We do not.
Okay, so you don't have any type of medical reports for Jane Doe 2?
We don't have any medical reports, that's why we ask on specific patient history. If they have any genital injuries or irritations or infections that may show differently when we examine them.
And once again, you rely on them to be truthful with you.
Correct.
And you rely on them to really have actually examined themselves to know whether or not they have any type of irritation,
Correct.
right? Because sometimes you can have that, I can't even say that.
The redness, erythema.
Redness. I'll call it redness. Okay. Sometimes the redness can you know, it can be itchy, it can have pain, or it can not have pain. Correct.
Correct.
So you relying on whether or not that particular redness predated the event, so to speak, is relying on whether or not the patient would have seen it or discovered it.
Correct.
At least it's to answer your questions, right?
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no medical way that you had available to you for this particular evaluation to determine the age of the redness,
Correct.
or whether the redness, you know, pre-existed the actual event that they're claiming.
Correct.
How far back could the redness go?
That depends on each patient.
So everybody's just like
Everybody's
here.
very different, yes.
Everybody's different sizes, different shapes, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, correct.
And also, you know, the way an individual might take care of their personal grooming habits might impact the redness also, right?
It would.
Right. So if an individual did not have good grooming habits, they first of all might not know that they have a redness which pre-existed, correct?
Correct.
And they might do things to themselves, you know, with cleaning or lack of cleaning, which might cause redness.
Correct.
And also there are topical items which might cause the redness themselves.
Correct. However, if it's usually by bad hygiene, usually the redness is diffuse. It's around the whole area, not one specific area.
Or, and the redness then dissipates at points, I'm taking it, right?
Yes.
So it dissipates in different levels. So it doesn't go all the way at once. It gradually disappears.
Correct.
So there's a variety of, actually there's quite a variety of causes of the redness that you have evaluated here in your report.
There are.
And so all you're saying is that if what the patient told you is true, then this might be consistent with what they're describing.
It can be consistent with the history of the penetration. However, I cannot address the cause of the redness.
Right? It's consistent, but it's not the cause.
Correct.
And like you said before, there's no way of you determining whether or not, you can't make the determination of whether or not this was consensual or non-consensual.
No, I do not.
Likewise, with any injuries to the anal area, same thing.
The same thing. Correct.
And because that area is particularly, I guess a better way to say it, that's the same, has the same problems or the same attributes as the vaginal area. It depends on the person and the way, I guess, their grooming habits too. Correct?
It can be, yes.
And things that they might come in contact with.
Correct.
And so the redness that you saw in that area, you have no way of dating.
I do not.
You have no way of what?
Dating.
Dating, okay, go ahead.
Like I don't know, date, but dating.
Right.
Dating, as in finding out when it happened,
Correct.
or how long it'd been there for. Right.
I can just document that it was there. I cannot say what caused it or how long it had been there.
Okay. So essentially, as far as the findings that you testified to regarding the vaginal area and the anal area, all you're saying is that there was some redness there and you don't know where it came from, how long it was there. Well, first of all, you don't know where it came from, correct?
Correct.
You don't know how long it was there for, correct?
Correct.
And you don't know what caused it.
Correct.
So, I mean, you've been testified in some pretty violent rape trials, yes?
Yes.
And so you see, in addition to the injuries that you see to the actual intimate, like the vaginal and rectal areas, anal areas, I mean, there are other items which can corroborate a violent episode, all right?
Objection relevance at 352.
Overruled.
Correct?
You can answer.
Can you please repeat the question?
I said there are other factors which might corroborate a violent episode, a violent attack.
Correct.
Right, I mean, scratches, correct?
Correct.
Bruises,
Correct.
lacerations.
Correct.
And there, you've seen, as an expert, you've seen lacerations in the vaginal areas?
I have. There's usually not so many injuries in a sexual assault in the vaginal area.
But to the right outside of the vaginal area, like interior thighs?
That is possible too, yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Finger marks, impression marks in the thigh area, right?
Correct.
Also about the rest of the body, I mean, bruising on the arms, neck, things like that.
Correct.
Those are all indicative of a violent sexual assault.
They are signs of a violent sexual assault, but you can have violent sexual assaults that do not produce any of those physical signs.
Okay, but those, what I just discussed with you, are signs of that, right?
Correct.
And you would note that in your SART report.
I would note if I found any findings, correct.
So we're clear for the jury, you made no findings here.
No.
There was no indications of any type of lacerations, bruising, anything.
No.
I know, just a quick step back to the redness. I know that you're an expert. I've actually seen you testify before. We have a history, but the redness, is that like subjective to the viewer? I mean, does it change depending on who's looking at it?
It can. The depth of color can change the border of how large the area is, but we do a lot of reviewing of our cases, and generally, even though we review each other's cases, then usually the findings are pretty standard. Somebody may see something a little bit redder or a little bit more purple. The borders or how big the size is may have changed a slight amount, but usually if one person finds a finding of redness on one area, then usually it's confirmed by another nurse.
Did you have this confirmed?
We have a medical doctor who's a medical director for the forensic unit, and she reviews all our charts.
And kind of circling back to the redness, are there other like I mean, you can get the redness from actual contact or abrasion, but are there non-contact type causes for redness?
There are. There's multiple of reasons why you can get redness on the hymen. As I say, usually if it's poor hygiene or irritation, then usually it's the whole area may be red with some irritation. They're not specifically one just small area. However, there are many reasons why there could be a red area on the hymen.
Not related to any type of trauma?
No.
I guess that was a bad way to put it. They're true or false. There could be many causes to the redness that are not related to trauma.
True.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you then were given a patient history that this individual was choked or strangled. Yes?
Correct.
Now, there's different ways of strangle. There's by ligature. That wasn't here, right?
Correct.
So the patient history was manual strangulation. Yes?
Correct.
There's a couple of ways to do that. There's one hand C-clamp type strangulation. She didn't describe that, did she?
She described two hands
Okay.
from the front.
And when can you show the jury how she positioned her hands when she described this?
She didn't, because actually on this exam, I didn't get her to show me exactly how she placed the hands on the neck.
Okay, but she said two hands to the neck.
Two hands to the neck.
She said two hands to the neck, and she said that she had trouble breathing, right?
Correct.
And she said that, what did she say, it was over a minute? How long was it?
1 to 2 minutes, she said.
1 to 2 minutes. Did she tell you that this person choked her in such a way that he knew how to not leave fingerprints on her or any marks?
She did not disclose that to me, no.
Okay. So you discussed during your direct examination about the physics or the biology of the throat and what can happen to you.
The anatomy.
The anatomy of the throat. Better word for it. All right. So when someone is being choked, there are certain things which, the things you look for to make a determination, or at least to assist you in determining whether there's any findings that you can make, correct?
Correct.
First off, which makes really a lot of sense, is somebody puts their hands in your throat, what does a person, normally try to do whose hands aren't restrained?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What would a person do if somebody is choking somebody? What would the victim do if their hands are not restrained?
Objection calls for speculation, lacks foundation, as to what someone would do.
Overruled. She's qualified as an expert. You can answer if you know.
From my experience, patients have said that if somebody has put their hands around their neck, that their reaction is to try and take their hands away from their neck to reduce the pressure in a fighting defensive mode.
Okay, so that fighting defensive move, would that individual, might dig their fingernails into the assailant, right?
They could. There's different ways that people react to being choked or strangled.
And by the way, that's one of the reasons that you take fingernail clippings from the victims in the STAR exam, correct?
And we do it for possible DNA evidence underneath the fingernails, yes.
Right, because the person might be in a defensive position and dig their fingernails into the assailant, right?
Or they could have tried to attack the assailant with their fingers in other areas.
So it's a natural reaction to try to pull somebody's hand off of you, right?
Yes.
And another natural reaction might be to dig your fingernails underneath the hands of the person who has his hands around your throat, right?
One would think so. It just depends on what's happening at that time.
Right. So sometimes you see scratch marks on the victim's necks.
Sometimes we do, yes.
Right. So let me ask you this then. When somebody is so she told you that she was having trouble breathing.
Correct.
She told you that she thought she was going to die.
Correct.
And that this took over between a minute and 2 minutes.
Correct.
So it would take it's within 10 seconds you can go unconscious, isn't it? True?
You can go unconscious if you have pressure on your arteries or your veins. It's consistent pressure for 10 seconds and you'll be unconscious. As a comparison, if you flip a soda can, that's 20 pounds of pressure. So 5 to 10 pounds of pressure consistently on your arteries or veins, you can render unconsciousness. However, if you're in a struggle, a fight, trying to fight for your life, defense kind of assault, then it may not be consistent pressure on those arteries or veins. So that is why you don't get unconsciousness with somebody who said it's been 1 to 2 minutes.
Right, and a lot of it has to do too with the assailant, the size of the assailant, correct?
Yes.
And the size of the victim.
Correct.
So if you have an assailant who is particularly powerful with larger hands, that might put a lot more pressure on somebody's neck than a smaller person with smaller hands.
Correct.
Fair to say?
Fair to say.
Yeah. So, at a minute to 2 minutes, essentially you could die at a minute.
You could.
And at 2 minutes, certainly you are unconscious.
You certainly
there's
would.
constant pressure, like you said, and it's applied, to the throat area with both hands, as she may have described, right? That's enough to really potentially kill somebody.
Certainly make you unconscious, and constant pressure, then that would render death of brain tissue.
Okay. So, what are the physical symptoms of a strangulation that you look for?
For physical symptoms, you can have shortness of breath, you can have a raspy voice, a change in voice, you can have tunnel vision from with your eyes, you can hear ringing in your ears, you can have disorientation, memory loss.
And this particular patient, you just described her voice being a little different?
She did.
It's like you don't know what her voice was like before.
I do not.
Because you never spoke to her before.
No, I have never spoken to her before that exam time.
Okay. And she had no trouble speaking with you?
She was able to answer all my questions, and I was not concerned to, sometimes patients will come and I have to send them to the emergency room straight away because of respiratory problems. She was able to talk clearly.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you about, can we get court's exhibit?
Your Honor, may I have a moment to review the exhibits?
Yes. Show counsel first.
Yeah. Court's exhibit 41.
Any objection to publishing?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, wait, that's not what I want. Sorry.
All right, 28 is now on the screen.
Okay. You see Court Exhibit 28?
Yes,
That's a photo of the front of the neck of Jane Doe.
correct.
And where are they? Can you grab that pointer and tell me on that picture where those sensitive areas that you're talking about that
The trachea would sit right here.
down the
And then
middle?
you have the external jugular veins on each side of the neck, and then more inside the neck, as you say, would be the arteries down each side here.
Okay, so you would agree with me that there's, on that, I mean, well, you're the expert, but you would agree with me that there are, I don't see any type of physical marks, abrasions, scars, scratches, anything in that picture.
There are not.
And this picture would have been taken the day after the alleged assault.
I believe my exam was 19 hours after the possible assault might have ended.
Can I see 29, please? Towards 29. So that's a picture of the side of the neck,
Yes,
Correct.
okay, the right side.
right side of the neck.
Correct.
A hand, if the patient described the hands coming up even close up to the ear, right? You were able to examine that whole area,
Yes,
okay? And you were, I mean, you did this with the patient right in front of you, correct?
correct.
And once again, correct me if I'm wrong, there are absolutely no scratches, scars, bruises, anything that you noted.
Correct.
Can I get 30, please? This is the left side of the neck.
Correct.
And same question. I mean, is there anything there?
There's no visible signs, no.
Not any redness or scraping, anything like that, right?
Correct.
One moment here.
I'm sorry?
One moment.
Sure. Go ahead, take your time. On or off?
No, please approach.
Oh, I thought you meant you want to have a sidebar.
No.
Oh, you approach the witness?
Yes.
Of course, go ahead.
In case for the law students looking at home, this house done. I'm going to show you a series of photos. This is Shawnee, which is marked as collectively Courts Exhibit 117. Do you recognize those photos?
I do.
What are those photos of?
These are photos of Jane Doe number 2, orbital photos. We take photos of the eyes and the white areas around the eyes in different locations while the pupil is looking left or right to look for any signs of specifically petechiae or hemorrhaging.
So you recognize these photos?
I do.
So what is petechiae?
Petechiae is little blood burst capillaries that can burst because of back pressure from pressure on the veins so that the blood cannot return from the brain down to the lungs.
Can you get 117
And how many photos are in 117?
7.
7, okay, thank you.
118, I'm sorry. 118. This is 118-1. Do you recognize that photo?
Just
I
a
do.
moment. What you just showed the witness, that was 118, not 117?
I have it 118. 118, I'm sorry.
Okay, just to correct the record, the photos that were just shown are in fact 118, and they consist of 7 photos of Jane Doe number 2, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So what is that photo of?
This is looking specifically at the eye of Jane Doe number 2.
What are you looking for?
Eyes. I'm looking for any hemorrhaging, any blood that could be on that white part of the eye, and also for any petechiae, which are the little blood burst capillaries that can be on the little white parts of the eye.
And the reason you look for petechiae is they're an indicator for a strangulation
They're an indicator that pressure was put on the veins of the neck.
of the neck, right? And where are the petechiae in that photo?
There are none.
Can I get the two? And what is that two? Okay. What is that?
This is another look at the eyes, again looking for petechiae or hemorrhaging, and there are none.
None. Three? Why are these in different, first of all, why are they in different sort of perspectives, looking out, looking side to side?
This way we can look at the as much as possible as we can of that white area of the eye, because sometimes you can get a small hemorrhage, a small blood burst capillary in one side of the eye but not the other. So we try and see as much as we can.
Okay. Anything?
No findings.
Next.
This is another variation of the assessment.
To look to a different, from a different perspective.
Correct.
And
Your Honor, may I inquire, is this 118-4?
so the next order was 4.
Is this 4? Yes, it is. I think is this 118-4?
Yes. Wait. Yes.
Okay, correct, it was not identified. All right, so this is 118-4. All right, next question.
Petechiae?
I did not see any, no.
Next in order. Next. All right. And this photo.
Same variation of the same assessment of the eyes. Again, no findings.
Why are the eyelids pulled up like that?
That is to help us be able to look at those white areas of the eyes.
Okay. And nothing.
No findings.
Now it's 118.5. This is 118.6 now on the screen.
Yes.
All right.
So the eyes are kind of, in this one, the eyes are sort of a little more shut, and then you're pulling the eyelids out. What's going on here?
This I'm trying to capture a picture of her eyes, the skin around her eyes, on her eyelids and below her eyes.
Why?
Again, looking for any physical findings of any trauma.
Right. Is that the petechiae could actually form on the eyelids, couldn't it?
It can, yes.
And that's what you're looking for there?
Yes.
And was there any?
No.
Next. In this photo.
This is again looking on that white part of the eye for petechiae or hemorrhaging or trauma. And there are no findings.
And this is 118-7, correct?
Yes.
All right.
In a strangulation event, or when, in a choking event, you're looking for petechiae, that can form actually on the skin also, correct?
It can.
It can form on the lips, correct?
It can form anywhere above the area where the pressure was applied on the neck.
Right, so anywhere above. So you've seen it like under the chin,
Yes.
and you've seen it on the eyelids,
Yes.
you've seen it on the ears,
Yes.
you've seen it on the cheeks, right?
Yes.
Anything on Jane Doe number 2, which that you found clinically significant or evidence of petechiae?
No petechiae found.
Any evidence at all of any type of violent choking event? Other than the patient saying that she was choked, right? Did you find anything that's consistent with a choking event?
What I found consistent was the symptoms that she had described, as in the neck pain and difficulty breathing and the change of voice. However, 50% of strangulation patients don't show physical signs.
So, had a choking event of 1 to 2 minutes with struggling involved, there's a high likelihood that there might be at least one physical indicator of a choking event.
That depends on where the pressure was applied at the time and how long the pressure was applied for.
and the person's involved, right?
Yes.
You got a bigger, stronger man with bigger hands over an individual pushing down. You might expect to see some injury, right?
At the time I did the exam, I did not know anything about the suspect,
It's hypothetical to you.
so
That would be
yes.
So a larger, more physically stronger man with bigger hands standing over an individual, the female, when you know the size of the female in this, you might expect to see some sort of trauma, some sort of injury.
You may, or you may just expect the symptoms that they had described.
Right. About a 1 to 2 minute choking event.
Correct.
Okay. And once again, you said that what you found in this event, the only thing that you did find were the items, I guess the history that she told you. That's the only thing you found.
Correct.
In other words, she said, I'm having trouble breathing, and you really have, you have to take her word for it, right?
Correct.
And she says, my voice is kind of weird. You got to take her word for it because you don't know what her voice is like.
I document what she tells me.
So what I'm saying is independently, physical findings in this particular case, there are none.
There are no physical findings, no.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Any redirect?
Not based on that, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. You are
Okay.
excused for
Thank you.
today. However, you are subject to recall.
Okay.
So you can leave today. You might be called back in the future. Okay? Thank you very much. Next witness.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Honor. We will now call District Attorney Investigator Catalina Pierce.
All right?
You do solemnly state that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. If you would, please have a seat at the witness stand. And if you would, please state your name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Catalina Pierce, Catalina Pierce.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, or good afternoon, Investigator Pierce.
Good afternoon.
I'll call you Ms. Pierce, is that okay?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what you do?
I'm an investigator for the District Attorney's Office.
How long have you been an investigator with the District Attorney's Office?
14 years.
Prior to that, did you have experience with law enforcement?
I did.
Where did you work before that?
San Diego Police Department.
In what capacities?
I was a police officer on patrol for 5 years, and then I went to investigations and worked various units for a total of 13 years with the San Diego Police Department.
After your 13 years with SDPD, did you come over to the DA's office?
I did.
And then as a DAI, or District Attorney Investigator, what are your duties?
Our duties are basically to help interview, investigate, locate witnesses. We basically work on cases that are in the court process at the District Attorney's Office. So it's kind of like being a detective, but we're just assigned to the cases that are currently at the District Attorney's Office.
Do you remain a sworn peace officer?
We do, yes.
Do you still have arrest powers?
I do.
And do you also, when you say that you conduct investigations, are there times in which DAIs will be the primary investigating agency, even separate from a outside law enforcement agency?
Yes.
Are you one of two investigators who have been primarily assigned to this particular case?
I am.
Is the other Chris Phelan?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to just ask you, I'm sure that there's a number of different things that you may be called to testify about, but as of right now, what I'd like to do is talk to you about a interaction you had with Jane Doe #1, and that's the way that we're referring to her. And in this case. Do you recall speaking with her on June 25th of 2018?
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just showing you Court's Exhibit 1 for identification. Do you recognize her as Jane Doe 1?
I do.
Now, on June 25th of 2018, did you meet with Jane Doe 1?
I did.
Where did that take place?
The district attorney's office.
Were there victim advocates who were also present?
Yes.
Was I there?
Yes.
What was the reason why we were meeting with her that day?
To let her know the case was moving forward, the arrest had been made, and to also provide her a subpoena for the upcoming court hearing.
Were you also present on a prior date on June 12th of 2018 when she was interviewed at the district attorney's office?
Yes.
On June 12th, did she state that she would be willing to cooperate with the prosecution and testify if necessary?
Yes.
On June 25th, then, on the date we're talking about now, was that the first time that she was informed that her case was moving forward?
Yes.
When you gave her a subpoena to appear in court, was that subpoena for a preliminary hearing?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, serve that subpoena for a date of June 28th, 2018, which would have been the original date for the preliminary hearing?
Yes, I did.
So you gave her a subpoena on June 25th to then have to appear in court on the 28th, right?
Correct.
Can you just tell the jury what type of information is contained on a subpoena?
On the subpoena, it has the court case number, the defendant's name, the date of appearance, the location of the court, a phone number for usually the paralegal assigned to the case, and instructions on when and where to go, specifically what department in the courtroom.
And when you provided her that subpoena for this case, did it in fact have the case title or case caption of People of the State of California versus Kellen Winslow II?
Yes, it did.
What did she do when she received that subpoena?
She looked at the subpoena, and then she said she recognized the name of the defendant as a football player, and she stated that she was a sports fan.
Now, did she give you any more specifics about, who she thought that he played for, or anything along those lines, if you remember?
She mentioned the San Diego Chargers.
Based upon what she said and her reaction to that, did it appear as though she was referring to someone known as Kellen Winslow Sr.?
Yes.
Who had actually played for the Chargers?
Yes.
Now, at that point, did she say whether or not she had seen that the case had some news or media attention at that point?
Yes.
Did she give you any details as to what she saw on the news?
She mentioned that the defendant had been in a news story that she had discussed with her mother, because the people related to the news story lived in an area where her mother had friends.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, Cross?
Good afternoon, Ms. Pierce.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me from here?
Yes.
The sexual encounter involving Jane Doe number 1 as the subject of this case occurred on March 17th, 2018.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And you served her with the subpoena on June 25th of 2018?
Correct.
And between March 17th and June 25th of 2018, Jane Doe number 1 was not under any kind of physical surveillance by your office, is that right?
By our office, no.
Or by any law enforcement agency?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And your office wasn't monitoring her telephone calls?
No.
She wasn't wiretapped?
No.
Your Honor, I'm going to object as to relevance.
Well, I'll allow the answer to stand, but it has marginal relevance. You can move on now.
Ms. Pierce, you have no idea what kind of information Jane Doe number 1 accessed between March 17th and June 25th of 2018.
Correct.
And you have no idea who she talked to during that time frame.
Correct.
Thank you, nothing further.
All right, any redirect?
No,
All right, can this witness be excused?
subject to recall, but yes.
Okay, oh, all right. Thank you, Investigator Pierce. You're excused for today. I have a feeling we'll see you again. All right, have a nice day. All right, do you have any additional witnesses ready today?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, so, I know everyone's looking at their watch. We can stay till 5 if you want, but let me just say, I spoke with the attorneys over the lunch hour. We are 2 days ahead of schedule on this trial, and so things are moving along. The witness that would be logically called next is out of town this week and was scheduled to testify, I think, on Tuesday. So we are moving along pretty quickly. So what does that mean? It means you get to leave at 2:30 and get an early start on the long weekend. So, but I want to assure you the case is moving along a lot faster than we thought. I'm going to keep that pace going, but just we ran out of witnesses today. Okay, so it's going to be a long weekend. We're going to see you back here Monday. It's going to be at 9 o'clock. Tuesday. Wait. Hang on for a second. We have, thank you. We have Memorial Day on the 27th, so please do not show up on Monday. If you do, you're going to be the only ones that are going to be here. So we'll see you on Tuesday, May 28th. It's going to be at 9 o'clock. Now, look, there's going to be a lot of news, print, a lot of news media. It's going to be on every night on the news. I know you've already had to be diligent, but please use extra diligence over this long weekend. Make sure you don't read any accounts or watch any TV accounts of this case. As I've said many times, you have to base your decision only on what you hear from the witness stand and inside this courtroom, not from what some mind reader is telling you who's telling everybody what you think, because they don't know, and they don't know how you're evaluating the evidence. So please be extra diligent, all right? So have a great weekend. Leave your notebooks on your chairs. Please remember the admonition. We'll see you Tuesday morning right at 9 o'clock. Thank you.